Greetings, dear listener. Subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new scary stories and support me with a like. Enjoy listening.
The basement is the scariest, smelliest, and most ominous place in our house, which I was so afraid to go down to as a child. I still get goosebumps at the thought that I have to descend into this darkness again. I can assure you that it's not just the darkness that I'm afraid of there, and the sounds are not made by rats. I was 7 years old then, and my parents went to the city to buy everything necessary for the upcoming, long-awaited holiday. There is a week left until the new year, which, in my opinion, has been dragging on for so long, like chewing gum. I sat at the computer and continued to play Stalker Clear Sky. Passing the game was so difficult for me that I even quit it several times, but I didn't intend to go for a walk that day. After the last party, all my shoes and clothes were wet. Besides, I was completely numb. It's surprising that the temperature didn't rise. That day I fully intended to devote myself to home. What's the hurry? 3 more weeks of rest and relaxation. I continued to sit in front of the screen, biting a cheese and sausage sandwich, scattering crumbs on my already dirty keyboard. Outside, the wind continued to howl, spreading snowflakes through the air. A real Siberian blizzard. And I'm home, warm and safe. And this thought made my soul even more pleasant. It was at that moment that I heard a new sound, cutting in half the silence reigning in the apartment. Scratch, scratching on wood. So dull, as if they were scratching on the other side of something wooden. The thought flashed through my head that before leaving, my parents let Fetty out onto the veranda. And now this red-haired prankster is scratching the door to return to a warm apartment and sleep on the stove. This made me really angry. A rage rose up inside me that I even wanted to punch the screen. I have an important mission in the game, and this damn cat decided to interfere with me at this very moment. I'll show him. When I got up from the chair, the sound stopped, but I didn't just get up. I trudged into the hallway, but the cat was in the apartment, frightened. The fur stood on end. He scratched the rug on the floor, but the sound was completely different. As I already said, they were scratching something wooden. The cat looked at me. The eyes are black and excited. He continued to sniff the rug, and underneath it, right in the floor, was the entrance to the basement. I scared the cat away with my hand and moved the rug aside. The door to the basement had no handle so that no one would trip over it. There was a small depression in the floor, under the door, and you could lift it with your hand. Are they really rats? We still lack this. The frosts began, so these little creatures crawled to us. Damn. Scratching again. Someone was scratching on the other side of the basement door, as if someone wanted to get out. For a few seconds I forgot that I had to breathe. The blood rushed into my head. I don't know why I was so scared, but I understood, as if I knew in advance that these were not rats at all. A hoarse voice was heard from behind the door, muttering something, but I couldn't understand what. By inertia, I crawled on all fours from the hallway into the living room, continuing to sit on the floor. The beating of the heart could be heard in the temples, and fear twisted in the stomach. I just sat and looked at the door and the floor with all my eyes. From there, some kind of gurgling began to be heard, which made the cats scratch their souls. At that moment I was not the only one who succumbed to panic. Fyodor arched his back and began to hiss as if it were water boiling on the stove. I couldn't come closer, but I couldn't go to my room either. I was scared to come close, but the fact that I would leave without observing all this seemed to me a worse option. The door began to slowly rise, quite slowly. A few seconds later I could already see a gap between the floor and the door, as thick as my little finger, dark as a black hole. A moment later a face was already looking at me, gray, sick, covered with cobwebs and dirt blackened by time. There is not a hint of a nose on him, with eyes ebony black and a mouth stretched to the limit and dark as the deepest tunnel. It looked at me, twisting in a toothless cry of pain. A skinny hand with incredibly long fingers stuck out from the basement. The dystrophic limb, shaking a little, reached out to me. From the mouth tunnel, along with the stench, came a quiet wheezing. It spoke my name. The world was shrouded in a gray veil. My body was so weak that I couldn't even use my facial muscles. After looking at the creature a little more, I fainted. The last thing I saw was the chandelier in the living room. Many years have passed since then, and I completely forgot about that incident. I now have my own family, a wonderful, beautiful wife, and a little son, Jaeger. On weekends we come to my parents. Christina's parents live in another city, and go fishing with friends, taking my son with us. Christina is already in her second month of pregnancy. Yes, we are waiting for the second. I hope it's a girl. I'll call you Oksana. Yes, that was my grandmother's name. Beautiful name. 6 months ago I got a new job. You can say that I was just lucky with her. Became an administrator in a newly opened chain of stores selling equipment. Now I am the director of the branch. Thank God my parents forced me to study. We didn't understand this before. Recently, having returned, coming home from work, it was already dark, and Christina met me on the threshold, dressed in her favorite blue robe. There was anxiety and concern on his face. She said that someone was scratching in the basement. She asked me to buy poison for mice, but I know that it's not about the rats. And now, when my wife is sleeping next to me and Agorka is in her room, I lie and remember the details of that incident, pouring out cold sweat. Maybe it was just my imagination then. I was very afraid to be alone, so my imagination came up with a certain creature from the basement, and then I felt something carefully. I would even say, with care, take my leg, which was not covered with a blanket and was hanging in the air. I'm too tall to fit in the bed. In the darkness of the room, in a whisper, it spoke my name. This happened in November. My parents went for a week to visit some second cousin in North Carolina, who supposedly needed help with wedding preparations. I stayed at home with my 5-year-old sister Mia. We lived in a private house, not far from the city. Day 1, I woke up quite early. My sister was sitting on the floor and sorting out her toys. It was necessary to prepare some food and feed the child. Half an hour later, breakfast was ready, and I called Masha into the kitchen. After enjoying the cereal and juice, my sister ran to my parents' room to watch TV, and I started washing the dishes. Soon a friend called me and invited me to go for a walk. Without thinking twice, I agreed. It was impossible to leave Mia at home, because she was afraid of some monster. Well, like most children, so I had to take her with me. We walked for a short time and returned home by lunchtime. My sister didn't want to eat. Of course, during the walk she ate enough sweets and cookies. Mom would have beaten me for this, but oh well. My sister and I had separate rooms, but while my parents were away, she settled in mine. Time flew by very quickly, and soon it was already very late. I put Mia to bed and started watching the movie. Suddenly some sounds came from the kitchen. Pausing the movie, I headed towards the source of the sound. There was no one in the kitchen, and I returned to my room. I no longer wanted to watch the movie and went to bed. Day 2, I woke up around 12. There was no sister in the room. Her absence didn't seem strange to me. Most likely, Mia is sitting in her parents' room and watching cartoons that are usually on at this time. And so it turned out. I was allowed not to go to school, but this did not free me from homework. The day passed very quickly. Nothing interesting happened. Day 3. That day my sister woke me up. She screamed and I had to run to her to find out what happened. From my sister's story, I understood that she saw a man in the window who looked at her and then disappeared. What nonsense. We have a good security system, alarm system, and all that. It would be impossible for someone else to get into the site. I thought that my sister was imagining things and did not take seriously her request to check the area around the house. Later, Mia calmed down. We ate and decided to take a walk. We returned at 7:30. What were we doing all this time I was on the street? Yes, actually, nothing. My sister just didn't want to return home. After dinner, we sat down to watch a cartoon. This made my sister feel calmer. I couldn't sleep that day. Mia tossed and turned all night, and I imagined some sounds. Day 4, my mother's call woke me up at 10:30. She asked if everything was fine with us and if we needed to bring something from North Carolina. I said everything was fine. We were having a good time and there was no need to bring anything. Of course, I reassured my mother, but my anxiety remained. On this day, Mia and I locked ourselves in the room and did not leave it. We brought food in advance. It was already 2 a.m. Suddenly someone started knocking on the room. Knock, knock. My sister was scared and I hugged her and began to calm her down. Nothing will happen. Knock, knock. This time the knocking was louder. Nothing will happen, I repeated in my head. Day 5, I called my friend and asked her to come. An hour later she was already sitting in my kitchen. After listening to my story, she thought I was kidding her, but I swore that it was all the truth. After that night, my sister went everywhere with me. Of course, the child was very scared. How happy I was when my friend agreed to stay overnight with me. After dinner we all went to my room and locked ourselves in again. Soon footsteps began to be heard. So heavy and rough. Everyone was filled with fear. We walked on the first floor, most likely in the kitchen. My sister was curled up on the sofa, and my friend and I were listening to strange sounds. Half an hour later someone knocked on the door. Knock, knock. We sat in silence. Knock, knock. My sister squealed quietly and came up to me. Tears appeared on her face. Knock, knock. This time the knocker had no intention of leaving. Knock, knock. We couldn't even move. They started scratching at the door. Oh, that terrible sound. Soon the sounds died down. The clock showed 4:07 a.m. Day 6. All. My parents will arrive tomorrow. This all must end. My friend swore at me and left, saying that she would never return here again. My sister and I walked around the whole house, but found only traces that led to the basement. We were smart enough not to go there. That day we decided to go to our grandmother and spent the night with her too. Day 7. Last. We returned from grandma's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The parents warned that they would be home around 10 in the evening. My sister drew terrible pictures all day. They showed the man she had seen a few days ago at the window. At 8 o'clock in the evening we sat in the living room and watched TV. Half an hour later we heard footsteps again. I took Mashed in my arms and went up to my room. Suddenly the light turned off. The door began to open quietly. My sister buried her face in my shoulder. I saw the silhouette of a man. He stood still for half a minute and began to approach us. That's it. This is the end. The front door opened and Mom's voice was heard. The man disappeared. I begged my sister not to tell anyone about what happened. She agreed and we went downstairs. We all sat down at the table. Our parents told us about our aunt's bad character and other nonsense. But I didn't listen. I couldn't get this man out of my head. What if he comes again? One night when I was about 12 or 13, my parents were gone for a while and I was just staying up really late, past midnight, on my desktop computer waiting for them to come home. Like most people, I had been told a million times not to talk to strangers on the internet, but about half my friends list on MSN were people I had never met before, so I was just chatting with a bunch of them. Out of nowhere, one of my online friends had told me exactly what I had been doing the past hour or two. Egg, what I was eating, drinking, playing with, when I had gotten up last. Things I hadn't mentioned in chat. I instantly got a horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. My desktop was set up in front of a big window, so as far as I knew, this person I had been talking to, that was supposed to live in a different country than me, had found my address and been watching me through the window. Turns out, he had somehow hacked into my webcam. I always left it plugged in even though I had been warned not to when I wasn't using it, and had been frequently watching me through it whenever he wanted. It's been 10 years and I still have all the cameras on my devices covered in thick duct tape. I had just moved into my first apartment. It was around 8:30 p.m. and I heard the doorknob moving like someone was putting a key in it and turning and knocking. At first I got really excited that my then boyfriend was home, but then realized it was only 8:30 and he was due home from work around 10:30. So I looked out the kitchen window and didn't see his car or anyone's car I had known parked outside. That's when I panicked. The doorknob kept moving for a few more seconds and then stopped. A few minutes later, they had some piece of metal they were sticking between the door trying to open the door. I freaked out at that point and locked myself in the bathroom with a knife and called 911. They tried to pry the door open for about 3 minutes before they stopped. The police surveyed the area and found an elderly man roaming around with a knife and a crowbar. He used to live in that apartment, and he wanted his stuff back that we stole when we moved in. I was told he was really delusional. I'm so thankful and glad I didn't answer the door once I realized it was no one I knew. To this day, my heart stops when someone knocks on my door. It was January in Minnesota. There was about a foot of snow on the ground, and my parents were out at a bar, and my brother was at a friend's house but would come back later. I was in my living room watching TV, and I heard a small knocking coming from the basement. So I walked down to investigate all over the basement to find nothing. Not thinking much of it, I walked back upstairs to the living room to continue watching. About 5 minutes later, I hear a loud crash from the basement and what sounded like a door opening. At this point, I was pretty worried. I started to make my way down the stairs terrified, and as I went down, I thought maybe my brother was home without me knowing, so I called his name. Nothing. I called again, and nothing, so I kept slowly moving down the stairs only to find that there were drawers open and desks, boxes opened, and a few plastic bins and containers all knocked down and tipped over. But worst of all, my back glass door wide open with footprints leading out the door. I shut it, called my parents, and when they came, my mom called the police while my dad followed them. According to him, they went over my fence into the road behind my house where they stopped. My guess is he was picked up, but we and the police never found out if it was planned or just a random house they picked to rob. Absolutely terrifying. Spent the night over at my cousin's house. We were home alone for the night and stayed up late playing video games. I remember he left the room to use the restroom. I must have been playing something good because I was sitting on the edge of the bed up close to the TV. As I played by myself, I felt my cousins come back in the room from behind me, and he laid back down on the bed. Gave me a little bounce as if he had jumped on, bed squeak and all. When I turned back to talk to him, he wasn't there. He was still in the restroom. I looked down on the bed where I thought I had felt him, and there was an imprint on the bed coming back up, like if someone had been there and were just coming off of it. I have 4 more stories about that house, but that's definitely one time I felt the most shaken. Most likely, you will think that I am crazy and paranoid, but believe me, I myself would not want everything described below to be true. I was sitting at home alone, sipping beer and watching another TV series. It was already about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was inexorably falling asleep. I turned off the computer, but as soon as my head touched the pillow, the beer asked to come out, and I was forced to get up. Out of habit, I didn't turn on the light in the toilet, and that's where it all started. I immediately remembered all my childhood fears and horror films that I had watched throughout my life. The sticky fear enveloped me more and more, and now I was afraid to get out of the push, but I still overcame myself and calmly walked to the bed. The next morning, remembering this incident, I just laughed and immediately forgot it. But the lower the sun went, the more the tension grew. For some reason, I really didn't want to be alone at home. I even called several people, offering to drink together, but everyone was busy. What happened next that evening changed my life forever. It was already evening. I, as usual, was sitting at the computer, and then suddenly I heard a noise from another room. I turned down the sound and heard it again. I already thought it was neighbors, but still decided to check. Walking down the corridor into the room from which it was coming, I heard it again, and that's when I really got scared. This was the sound my parrot made when he started hitting his beak against a mirror. The cage was flimsy, so it rattled a lot. Everything would be fine, but my parrot died a couple of years ago. Overcoming fear, I opened the door, but naturally, there was nothing inside. An hour and a half passed, and 1.5 liters of beer passed through me, and the fear gradually subsided. Remembering that I had vodka in the refrigerator, I decided to go for a walk, although I never drank vodka alone. Entering the kitchen, I again did not turn on the light, and as soon as I opened the refrigerator, I felt a heavy gaze on me. In a second, fear turned into panic. but I was afraid to move. The light from the light bulb in the refrigerator was the only thing that protected me at that moment. What was standing behind and looking at me began to approach, and I stood, staring at a piece of sausage, and prayed for a miracle. And it happened. The refrigerator beeped disgustingly, reminding me that it shouldn't be left open for more than 30 seconds, and the look disappeared. Grabbing vodka, I flew into the room like a bullet, turned on the light, started the music, and sat until the morning, without closing my eyes. After that, I was afraid to be alone at home for a week. I either invited friends to my place or stayed with them. And when he was still alone, he turned on the lights in the entire apartment and tried not to leave his room. I prepared food during the day and brought it to the room so that I had something to eat at night, because I couldn't sleep properly. I might also add that I started drinking quite a bit. In an alcoholic stupor, everything seems less scary. After about a month, everything somehow forgot itself. But I still turned on the lights everywhere. Sometimes I thought about all this, and in the end I came to the conclusion that I was just having problems in my head, because I had never seen physical evidence of the existence of what frightened me so much. This thought was like the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. I promised myself that if this happened again, I would simply make an appointment with a psychiatrist, and together we would solve my problems. But everything turned out to be much worse. One day, after drinking 3 liters of beer, I fell asleep. Waking up at night because I really wanted to relieve myself, I got up and walked to the toilet on autopilot. As soon as I opened the door to the toilet, I began to sweat, and goosebumps began to run down my back. The only light was on in the toilet. Only in the toilet. Although I turned on all the lamps in the apartment myself. Once inside, I locked the door and hid in a corner, praying that the light in the toilet would not go out. If it had gone out that day, I would probably have gone crazy. In the morning, I found myself crying near the toilet. My bones ached, probably a good half of my nerve cells had died, but I didn't care about all that. The main thing is that I survived. The next week I went on such a binge that I wouldn't recommend it to my enemy, but it was impossible to drink endlessly, and there was no money for drinking anymore. Having sobered up, I realized that everything had gotten even worse. Now I always felt eyes on me, even during the day with the lights on. I would like to end my story at this point, but the most terrible thing is happening right now. While I am typing this text, the door to my room is equipped with patterned cloudy glass, through which only silhouettes are visible. For the past hour, out of the corner of my eye, I have noticed some movements behind the glass. I tried not to look towards the door, but in the end I couldn't resist. Looking at the door, I was filled with indescribable horror. I saw him through the glass. I don't know what it is, but it's looking at me from behind the door, and I'm scared as never before in my life. I'll tell you guys a true story. I was 14 to 15 years old then, such against rage. One day my parents gathered to visit their friends for the weekend. They wanted to take me with them, but I refused and was left alone at home. I'm not lying. With the cat. The cat is also a participant in the story. Well, my parents left. I waved to them through the window, an exemplary son, and began calling my friends, like we'll have a party without supervision and restrictions. But bad luck, whoever has other plans, who left. I won't bore you, I was left alone. Back and forth. It was late in the evening. I watched TV, strummed my guitar, and that's it. Damn boring. Let me, I think, listen to some music. A guitar on the wall. I turned on the Mayphone, put on my headphones, and plunged into the world of beauty. And at some point, suddenly such a feeling arose not alone in the room. You probably know how it is. So, I take off my airs and look around the room suspiciously. No one is around, not even a cat. Well, I think glitches have attacked. I listen to it. It just means putting on headphones. The string of the guitar tinkling, as if someone had pulled a finger. What the There's a guitar on the wall. There's no one nearby. I don't see a cat nearby. Yeah, it's starting. I had troubles with a brownie at one time. I was strangling him at night. The spirits are completely gone. It's not even night, but late evening. Let me go get the cat. After all, there's a living soul nearby. It's Kama. I went, took the cat, fed it, and brought it to my room, and he was kind of upset, looking at one wall with wild eyes. Well, damn it. He called the defender, and he needs to be calmed down. And then the string tinks again. My heart starts beating, something faster, a little scary, and the string is already different again. tinkling, and most importantly, while I'm not looking in the direction of the guitar. No, I don't think there's a place for me in the room. I'll go take a bath, have a cup of coffee. I go into the bathroom, turn on the water. Then the cat scratches the door and asks to come to me. He likes to lie on the washing machine while I'm in the shower. I started it, undressed, and splashing into the water. I lie there relaxing. Then the light went out, but the most interesting thing was that you could hear the click of the switch. Both are getting creepy. He got out, carefully opened the door, clicked the switch, the light came on. I went back to the bathroom. Only into the water there was another click and the light went out. It's no longer funny to me. It's like crazy. Here the cat is still acting weird. His fur is standing on end. He's looking at the door with wild eyes. Protector and comma. Yeah, I think Sasha has relaxed. It's time to get out and boldly check the whole apartment. I open the door. The cat doesn't want to go out first. Usually, he always flies forward. Okay, I'll go myself. The traitor cat stayed in the bathroom. I went out, turned on the lights everywhere, walked around the house, everything was clean. I calmed down and went to watch TV. Then the cat flew in, jumped into the chair, and became quiet, as if sleeping. A little time passed. The cat raises its head and looks towards the corridor, and of course I stared there. What kind of trouble is there? I looked, and there was some kind of shadow on the floor, and it seemed to be moving closer and closer. My hair stood on end, and not only on my head. My heart wanted to jump out of my chest. And then I can't even explain what happened. I seemed to pass out. My eyes were open, and my consciousness disappeared. When everything returned to normal, I was sitting on the sofa. The TV was showing something. The cat was already sleeping again. Damn things. In short, I didn't fall asleep until the morning. I watched all the programs in a row, and at dawn I passed out. And I don't even know how to interpret this incident. Has anyone encountered something similar? This is the story that happened to me. Believe it or not is up to you.